Hi, hello. Hi, hello everybody. It's Donal here. Yeah, I just thought I'd do a bit of a chat and make a video. It's kind of a live blog, and yeah, just having a bit of a chat as to where I am at the moment, what's happening in my life, and where I'm planning to take things. So at the moment, I'm 52 years of age. Just try and get into a good position here. 52 years of age, and I've got a 8.5-year-old son. Working on my relationship with his mom, and yeah, Kathy's his mom. Roman's my son. So basically, we've got a. I'm not very good with lighting, so I might have to do a bit of adjusting to kind of make things better. But I'm trying to just get the maximum light I can at the moment. So yeah, so I've just started. I live here in New Zealand. I'm living in Auckland, on the North Shore in Auckland, which is where I think all the nice beaches are. I think some other people would disagree with me about that. But basically, we've got. I wonder will I try this without glasses? Yeah, see how much better it looks. Yeah, a little bit hard to see. Okay, try glasses for a while. So recently, my big news is that recently I decided to go back and study counselling. So I'm doing a counselling degree, and I'm doing it at a Christian college. I'm not going to say the name of the college just because I'm not sure that the college would necessarily feel comfortable with that. But basically, yeah, it's a Christian university, and I'm feeling really, really good about that. I've got a background in medicine. I've got a background working as a doctor in New Zealand, and I have to say I'm kind of a follower of Sigmund Freud. I'm a big fan of Sigmund Freud, and he was a medical doctor as well. He got into the he got into psychoanalysis and psychotherapy from, I think, through hypnosis. I think he learned about hypnosis from a guy who lived in France. Sigmund Freud was Austrian, as far as I know, and he learned about hypnosis from a guy called Charcot, who was working in France. And Freud, who was a practicing neurologist, which basically means that he would have been involved in treating strokes or treating people with other neurological disorders, maybe what we call multiple sclerosis now, or other type of neurologies are there, like maybe Guillain-Barré syndrome. Anything that affects your nervous system is essentially a neurology. And there can be chronic and acute neurological disorders. So basically, yeah, if you have a stroke, it affects your brain, and that's part of your nervous system. So that's why it comes under neurology. And your nervous system then affects your ability to move your arms and your legs and to speak. And in some cases, you can have a stroke that'll kill you because it'll affect your ability to breathe. So the nerves running to your your breathing centers in your brain. So basically, so that's a very short course in neurology, by the way. But Sigmund Freud found that he could do more for patients by using what he did. What he really did was regression. So he would get people lying down on the couch, get them into a nice relaxed state, and he found that they would by kind of getting people relaxed, and I'm sort of feeling that he did this eyes closed. I'm not 100% certain about this, but by getting people to relax completely, they tended to end up talking about their past. And when you're talking about your past, not talking about your present, 90% of the time, you're actually starting to access what's known as the subconscious, your subconscious. Because you're not really conscious of your past when you're in the present. So it's only really when you close your eyes and you start to really relax, you tend to start bringing your past into consciousness. So you're dealing with your unconscious, with what is normally unconscious, and you're bringing it into your conscious memory. So I think what Sigmund Freud discovered was a doorway from somebody's past into somebody's past. And what he discovered, probably, and Charcot discovered before him, was that when you got people talking about their past, that they normally talked about the parts of their past that were unprocessed. So what we've come to call today PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. That is really where the territory that Freud was hitting into, which was the unresolved traumas, post-traumatic stress disorder. So he was dealing with stressed patients. He was dealing with patients with what you might call it what he came to know, I suppose, as a stress disorder. So they had a disease that was as a result of stress. And so basically he was trying to get to the trauma and get them to talk about the traumas. And by getting them to talk about the traumas, of course, if you're an adult now talking about a trauma that happened as a child, in a safe environment with a therapist sitting on a couch, plus with the perspective of an adult, you're now revisiting the territory of your childhood. A lot of the time, your childhood, not always your childhood. You can be dealing with something that happened last week, but a lot of the time you're dealing with your childhood. So if you're starting to deal with the territory of your childhood with an adult's perspective, you do tend to, I think probably the best word for it is you almost start to self-therapy. So you start, as a child, you've been traumatized. You can be quite stuck in a perspective. You may have been quite overwhelmed. You might have been very disempowered. It might have been very frightening. And a lot of the traumas, a lot of the reason why stuff gets traumatized and unprocessed is exactly that, because it is frightening, and it's overwhelming. And as a child, you normally haven't got the capacity to deal with it. And so what tends to happen is that you just put it on ice, like the movie Frozen or whatever. You freeze these memories, these traumas get frozen in your subconscious is the easy way. I'm not sure where your subconscious hangs out, but these memories get frozen, and basically unless we actually deal with them at some point later in our time, either in therapy or in a dream or in a conversation with somebody, unless we actually talk about what happened then and reprocess it to some extent, it does tend to cause problems, because if you haven't dealt with a trauma and it's sitting there in your subconscious, it will actually be affecting your ability to do life. And my personal experience of this is directly from the death of my father. My father died when I was 6 years old, and I remember his death, I remember I wasn't there at the time. He was in England, I was in Ireland, but I remember being told that he was dead, and I remember not expecting to hear that. And I can remember having a very difficult time trying to come to terms with that new information and trying to process it. And you know, I've had a few different accounts of what I looked like objectively trying to process that. And one of my sisters has said to me that I screamed, who was there, said that I basically screamed the house down and raged and was almost unrestrainable at the time in my reaction to hearing about my dad's death. I don't remember that. I just remember lying on a bed and, biting a pillow and basically, just kind of wanting that information to go away and not be true. And I remember then waking up afterwards feeling quite shocked and just being numb and kind of walking around like a zombie, and my uncle telling me to come down and get a bite to eat, and kind of, I think there's a sort of I kind of went around in a shocked state, and I kind of feel like, as if, I don't like to say it, but I feel like as if the only way of describing how I've been dealing with my father's death and that trauma is that I haven't been dealing with it, and I've just been shocked on the inside, but doing life on the outside. That's about the best way that I can put it. And so this is obviously quite a long time ago, because I'm 52 now. So that means that I must have been, 46 years ago. 20 years ago, I met somebody who was, I would call a therapist or a healer of some type, German lady. And she pointed out to me that she felt I hadn't dealt with this. I needed to go and get some help around this and do some grief therapy and get into it a little bit, start talking about what happened then and my relationship with my dad, etc., whatever grief therapists recommend. So I did, yeah. In 1998, I actually started to do some grief therapy, and I was shocked actually to find myself in a room full of people who actually, and doing a weekend course with people who actually wanted to talk about somebody who was dead, because clearly I hadn't talked about my dad for 26 years at that time. And all of these people we were all in the same boat. We hadn't really been talking about the person who was dead. Now, there was some people there who had a recent bereavement, so they obviously were in a different category. But there were quite a few of us there who had kind of what I would nearly describe as walled off grief, where we had just put it on hold and we hadn't gone there, and we had just kind of parked the whole process, and were kind of quite looking at each other, kind of quite fascinating that we had found this secret island where we could actually start to talk about the people that we needed, this person that we had an issue, a grief issue, an unresolved grief issue with. So what I'm saying is that 20 years ago, I started to deal with something that had happened 46 years ago. So when I qualified, I then over the last 20 years, I've done a lot of therapy. I've done a lot of on myself. I've done a lot of courses. I've trained as an emotional practitioner. So the training was kind of working on myself as much as ticking any boxes, to be honest, although we did have to do 40 actual cases where we did a process with somebody, and which takes about 2 hours, 3 hours or whatever, and actually just write a report on that and send it in and submit it in order to get certified as a practitioner. So what I'm saying is that 20 years of therapy, what maybe gave me confidence to sort of to kind of get. I got very good at maybe recognizing that we all tend to have stuff going on that we haven't dealt with. Maybe that's this simple way of putting it. Sorry, I'm just trying to get rid of this some shine in the middle of the thing here, just there. But yeah. But yeah. So I decided that you know, that I've always been, as a result maybe of my own personal journey, I've always been fascinated with the effects of, not so much the, you know, just maybe perhaps the benefit of helping people to open up these hurt lockers, you might call them. I've really, it's not nice to see people stuck in their life, and maybe some people have a gifting to see people freed financially. Other people have a gifting to see people's houses built beautifully for them. I think the gift that God has given me is the ability to help people, to help people to get free from these subconscious lids that they've put on themselves. I mean, obviously from the death, not obviously, but as a result of my father's death, it's left me with a kind of, maybe I call it catastrophic thinking tendency. I tend to look at the worst case scenarios, what's going to happen next. I've got a degree of hypervigilance there that comes from, like, how do I know that somebody's not going to ring me up on the phone and tell me that everybody that I know that I love is suddenly dead? I tend to think like that. I don't like saying that, but it's probably the truth. And that comes out of, I wasn't able to control what happened to me in 1973, and had a deep impact on me. And so, in a way, until I actually go through everything that did happen to me, I'm going to be a little bit armed up against taking another phone call like that, to an extent. Maybe it's a bit like somebody who's been sexually abused is going to have problems when it comes to sexual intimacy. Well, I'm going to be, I'm maybe in the same boat in terms of what, close relationships, just letting down my guard over a lot of things. Maybe, I don't know when a train's going to come through the wall. Maybe, that's kind of maybe the way I think generally, because that was my experience when I heard that my dad was dead. I just got a big shock. And so, so what I've noticed when I was working in the hospital system as a medical doctor, one of the things that we do is we take people's, you take a social history and a family history, and when you're admitting a patient, and one of the things that I discovered was that a lot of my patients had got significant gaps maybe in their social history or in their family history. That's probably the easy way of putting it, or just things that started to stand out. I mean, I got, let's just take an obvious case. I mean, if somebody tells you that they're a drug addict or they're an alcoholic, that's kind of obvious, isn't it? Like that there's something that's not right in their life. You don't try to go, oh, that's great, I'm glad you're an alcoholic. How many drinks are you up to, a week? It's not seen as an achievement to be an alcoholic. It's not an achievement to be a drug addict. If somebody says that they've been divorced 3 times, it might just tell you that they've got a problem staying in relationships. If somebody tells you that they've never met their parents, there's an outside chance that they may have some issues around that, in the same way as I had some issues around the death of my dad. It's not a certainty, but it's just a maybe. If somebody tells you that they've been sexually assaulted as a child, it's not going to be into the same category as you know, like, you know, I was I was first in my class at dancing or something, you know, as a child. So like, you know, these are traumas, and a lot of the time. And so, you know, I came across a lot of traumas in people's lives, social history, family history. You know, you might even pick it up when somebody tells you what their career is. When somebody oh, I haven't been working. I haven't been working for the last, you know, 20 years. I've been on antidepressant medication, or I'm suffer from schizophrenia. You know, I personally myself came up with some serious mental health challenges when it came time to, you know, when I started to get to the root, before I came to the realization that that I hadn't dealt with the death of my dad. I was dealing with a lot of problems. I was dealing with, you know, I was binge drinking, definitely, although culturally was almost normal in Ireland, in the setting that I was at. It was, you know, a lot of student functions are centered around alcohol. But I can safely say now, as 8 years a non-drinker, that I was a heavy binge drinker and had a serious problem with alcohol. You know, I had been suicidal at one point in my life in 1996, when I actually thought that I had sexual problems. I actually felt that I was gay. I was worried that I was gay. I didn't want to be gay. And so so I found myself looking at ways of avoiding a gay lifestyle, and that was by killing myself. So I had, and I'm glad to say that I managed to see through that, that lie is the only way that I can put it. That lie. You know, I mean, you know, we've all heard about teachers who've told them that they'll never amount to anything, and then these people end up doing really well, and they look back and they say that what that teacher said wasn't true, right? So I'm in the same boat. I came upon a situation where you know, I doubted myself, and I thought that I was gay, and it was largely due to the culture out there that it's genetic, and that, you know, that you know, that there's certain people that are born gay. I bought into that lie, and I nearly killed myself as a result of not wanting to be less than a full man. You know, I didn't want to be gay. I wanted to be a normal heterosexual male, and to have normal heterosexual relationships. And I had a very nice girlfriend that I hadn't been able to kind of maintain the relationship with, due to lack of confidence in myself, and lack of self-esteem, I think. Yeah, I know, actually, it was a huge amount of lack of self-esteem. But I just came to the conclusion that, you know, oh, it must be something wrong with me. I must be, you know, I must be disabled. I must be a gay person. And so I decided to go out and get, you know, deal with this. Like, I decided to hang myself at one point. I decided to kill myself using, you know, the carbon monoxide poisoning. And another time I got a bit of glass and was going to cut my wrist. But anyway, as I say, I got through that. So yeah, so by the time I'm saying this because, you know, not only had I managed to get through thinking that I was gay, and I had also managed to sort of, I got past the alcohol thing later than that, but I also had some serious mental health challenges. I was really quite high. I suppose I went high and low quite a bit. Sometimes I never really went low. I was kind of always switched on. So possibly in an ungrounded way, I was always kind of over revving a little bit. I was kind of like full of energy, all go, but I wasn't really present. You know, my feet weren't on the ground. I don't know what's. I mean, my feet obviously were on the ground, but I'm trying to think how to describe this best. Maybe I was, you know, racing through things. I had a tendency to kind of, you know, jump from one thing to another. So I would change the topic. I would go from one thing to another, you know, very quickly. You know, I think I had a lot of issues when it came to having good relationships, because I was kind of constantly thinking, my thoughts were somewhere else. Maybe I was absent minded. I think I was absent minded. I was quite rooted. I was very much stuck in my past. I was still kind of frozen on the inside, but kind of chatting to somebody on the outside. And so in a way, I wasn't really able to have a lot of empathy for people, because I wasn't really able to listen to them, because I had so much self chatter going on in my own head. I suppose just telling me that I, you know, that I had a lot of, yeah, I don't know whether you'd call it a voice, but I definitely had lack of confidence in myself. So when I would be talking to somebody, I think there was only a certain way that I was able to relate to them. I wasn't able to fully relate to, I could sort of listen to people and hear pain in their stories, but I wasn't able to maybe relate to some of their responsibilities as adults, you know, that, because I hadn't really developed a sense of responsibility in myself. And I'm not saying that is a bad thing. I'm just saying that I wasn't mature enough to be able to actually handle responsibility. And so, you know, an example of that would be when a girlfriend of mine was pregnant at one stage. I wasn't really able to kind of see her situation. I was able to hear her situation, but I couldn't really stay present with it, because I think I just had I was bouncing off, you know, out into the stratosphere all the time. I was possibly trying to save the planet all the time, rather than trying to actually, you know, be in a relationship with this person who I felt was rejecting me anyway. And so, you know, I think I was so wounded on the inside and so fragile on the inside, is probably a better word, that I was incapable of sort of listening to another person's story, or able to listen to another person's need, because I lacked capacity. I hadn't got any capacity to meet people's needs. Maybe that's the best way of putting it. I could hear people's needs, I could hear people's pain, but I had no real capacity to walk with people through their pain, because I was in so much pain myself. I was just shut off from, dissociated really from what I've now learned is the real me. You know, the real me, which is the me that's kind of inside that trauma, like the child that got a, you know, such a shock when my father died. If I hadn't had that shock, I probably would have grown up with a lot more receptiveness, integratedness, you know, just more of a normal childhood. And so I'd be able to listen with two ears rather than kind of half there, half not there. You know, that's probably the best way of putting it. So, yeah, so just, I suppose I'm starting to wrap up a little bit here, because I'm just watching how long I've been talking. But yeah, so after 10 years practicing medicine and coming into a lot of conflict with a lot of the consultants where I worked at, and eventually losing my job, I was constantly advocating for patients to do therapy, to do counselling, to get some help with their unresolved issues, so that they could heal their medical problems. And And to a large extent, what I was saying was falling on deaf ears, and it certainly seemed to. Well, it wasn't falling on deaf ears. It was kind of annoying a lot of consultants, because I think they felt threatened by this new concept of, well, not a new concept, but they felt threatened by this idea, what I was promoting, which was a non-medicalized approach to chronic medical problems, and just a new direction. They weren't referring people with ulcerative colitis, with Crohn's disease, with diabetes, with thyroid problems, with arthritic problems, with multiple sclerosis. Traditionally, these patients weren't being referred, and probably still aren't being referred to, psychotherapy, hypnotherapy, counselors. They were just being seen as people with medical problems. There was still the mind-body connection, certainly 6 years ago, was still at a very it wasn't at an early stage, but it just hadn't really permeated through mainstream medicine, was my experience of it. And so I was kind of almost seen with hostility, actually, by quite a few I certainly felt that I was seen with hostility by some of particularly the junior medical consultants, and particularly the ones that were working in the areas of gastroenterology and endocrinology, because they were some of the patients that I was most obviously saying would be able to completely heal if they had the right psychotherapeutic input, or now I'm saying counselling input because I'm doing a counselling course. But so for a couple of years I tried to get onto therapy or psychotherapy training. And my sister did actually complete psychotherapy training here in Auckland, and so I tried to get onto the same course, but they wouldn't accept me onto the course because they felt, or one person in there felt, that I still had too much to deal with myself. And I kind of agree with him, actually. I think he was right. I think I hadn't really reached the point that I was able to listen and would have been able to do the course. I think I probably would have been too disruptive as well. I think I still too high needs, and too dissociated, and too unhealed. And so I think I probably would have ended up making too much noise in class, and possibly just creating too much disruption by being too needy. So thankfully, now this year I've been accepted into the course that I'm doing, which is in counselling, and it's really amazing because I'm back in an area that I really love. I'm in an area that I really love. I never was training as a counsellor, and I never got to train as a psychotherapist, but I did train as an emotional therapist. And so, it's really great to be in a classroom full of people again who are fascinated with what's going on in other people's lives. I think, I'm where I am. There's an aspect of, I just need to be careful that I don't get too involved in what's going on in other people's lives, and just neglect what's actually going on for myself in my own life, but and in the life of my son and my son's mom. But I feel like it's still a big area of interest for me, and I feel like that's where God is calling me to be, to be able to use the things that I've had to overcome and get through the different problems that I've had to get through, and help others perhaps in the same journey. We'll see. But it's pretty exciting times at the moment. So if you like this video, please subscribe, and to my channel. I think it's just called Donal Keane at the moment, but we'll maybe I'm gonna start doing regular videos. One of the main reasons why I want to do this is that I'm wondering whether or not I might be able to use my videos as a source of revenue to put me through college, but I'm not sure. Let's see. And maybe, I don't know, maybe I can have a lot of fun. I think I've got some good things to share and some good wisdom to share, and I would like my experiences of life to get out there a bit more, so that I can more effectively impact other people. I think I've had a lot of experiences. I've really, at one stage I was looking down the barrel of a gun at being diagnosed with schizophrenia. And I think really at the end of the day, all it was just I hadn't really effectively dealt with the death of my dad. You know, and I'll go into it a bit later on another video about some of the steps that I took to actively, you know, get closer to who he was as a person, and to actually unstick myself, you know, from the trauma of losing somebody that I didn't really know. You know, I knew him as a child, in a child-adult sort of capacity, but I didn't know the man, Dennis. So, you know, I'm getting to know who he was as a man, and it's actually interesting because I'm also getting to know who he was as a teenager, you know, from some people that I've met, friends of his and that. So anyway, okay, God bless you all. I'm off to church now for the evening service, and I hope you've enjoyed my video, and yeah, hopefully I'll get my lighting and my background situation a bit sorted out. The only thing that looks reasonable in this is my shirt, I think. So anyway, thank you so much, and God bless.